Today we are doing a hiking adventure at the Sewee Trail, which is the Sewee Shell Ring Trail in Awendaw, South Carolina. Down the trail we go. It is a 1 mile loop, apparently, and we'll eventually get out to the salt marsh. And nothing. Ah, the sounds of the forest. Tilly looks like she's on a destination. As we get closer to the shell ring, we start to see signage because we do not want to destroy our American heritage. So we're getting closer. Tilly's a little bit happy. So we do not dig out here. We don't metal detect out here. We don't do any of that because we want to preserve our American heritage, which is quite important for future generations to see. This shell ring is 4,000 years old, so we want it to go for a few thousand more years. So we're almost there. We're going to take a look at it here in a minute. So here it is. This is a prehistoric shell ring. You see it goes around right there. Goes around. Zoom in a little bit. And this is considered one of the northernmost shell rings, going from the coast of Florida through Georgia up to South Carolina. Yeah. See it right there? Goes around right over there. The shell ring with oyster shells. Okay, so we have the shell ring. It goes all the way around. It arcs all the way around. And then out there is a smaller mound. Probably, yep, those are also oyster shells. I don't know if you can see because the glare is pretty bad, but there's little crabs down there. I think those are fiddler crabs. They hold their little claws like they're playing the fiddle. Look at them all. There's fish down there. There's something rather large splashing around in here a minute ago. And over here, we have our natural oysters. Oysters are a commodity out here. People love eating oysters out here in the coast of South Carolina. Let's head on back down the trail and look at this other site. So behind me is the prehistoric shell ring, which we hiked on out to. There are several interpretations of what this could be. Some archaeologists have argued that it is a water holding tank. So the native peoples who lived out here, or the prehistoric people about 4,000 years ago, gathered all of these oyster shells and made them into a circle for a water reservoir, for drinking water. Another interpretation of it is that it was a fish trap. This particular shell ring, some archaeologists have argued, was originally a C shape instead of a closed circle. Some people think it was a closed circle. Some archaeologists argue that it was. So the C shape then would mean that it was a fish trap of some sort from the salt marsh out here. Another interpretation of it is that it was like a fort, and the people would live inside of the walls of the shell. So the shell ring would act kind of as like a defensive fort, which would make sense because it's right on the salt marsh, but so do the other things that it was interpreted as. There were several things found out here: pottery, bones, several other artifacts. There's an entire report that was written on this area and several excavation sites that have been done out here. So it is 4,000 years old, and we're going to check it out a little bit more to see exactly what we think it is. Okay, walking back around the boardwalk. This entire area arcs around the shell ring. More mound up there. So you can see right here, there's more mound of shells going on that way. Okay, so this smaller area here looks like a smaller shell ring. I've seen the LiDAR of this area, and I have to look at it again, but if the interpretation that this was some sort of water holding tank reservoir, there could have been a reservoir here, and then the bigger circle out there would have held more water as well, or to catch fish. As I was saying in my video, there is an entire historic context or report written on these archaic shell rings, and this is that report. I just wanted to show you guys a couple portions of it which you may find interesting. The first portion I want to show you is this page right here, which shows you what these shell rings are shaped like in Florida, South Carolina, and Georgia. This one right here that I'm circling with the mouse is our shell ring, which we visited in the video. This one is interpreted, the Sewee Shell Ring is interpreted right here as being a circle, but as I said, this report argues that it was either a C or a circle. It could have been either. Right now it's a C. Some of it has eroded away. This is a map showing you where they are all located. Some important archaeological information. This is one interpretation of it, with housing units on the top of the shell mound, with more interpretation on the interior there. Topographic views of each shell ring, or of some of the shell rings. Of course, this is showing you elevations and how they are raised and stuff. This one is a shell ring that is in South America, which is another interpretation. Pottery, which has been found at the shell rings. So pottery at archaeological sites usually helps date the site. So if you find a pottery and you're an archaeologist, that gives you some ideas as to how old these sites may be. This is showing what was found and the date of some of these sites. Lots of writing and lots of more interesting facts about the pottery, etc. Some of the shell tools that were found. These are tools common in the late archaic sites in the southeastern Florida coast. So yes, you can go through here and look through this entire report. These are bone pins that were found. You can look through this entire report, see some of the things, the archaeological finds that they found at the sites, and interpret for yourself what it may mean. So, tell me what you think. Not only were these sites possible living quarters, defensive fortresses, a way to store water, or a way to catch fish, but the oyster shells were a pretty important building material as well. So they would take these oyster shells, and entire civilizations were built off of this concept and this idea. They would take these oyster shells and they would make something called lime. And what lime is it's burnt oyster shells. They would take the oyster shells, they would burn them down to a white dust, powdery dust, and then they would add water to it, which would cause a chemical reaction, making a paste, and that paste would actually end up being mortar. You would mix in other things like ash and dirt and stuff like that, and the mortar is an important building material. But also the oyster shells are also important and a key ingredient in tabby. And what tabby is basically concrete. They would make the lime out of the oyster shells, and then they would take whole oyster shells and mix it in with that lime. They would mix in dust and dirt and everything, and they would be able to make an entire structure. Colonial Dorchester, which is actually 17th century, which is like a few thousand years after the shell ring, is made out of tabby. So tabby was an important building material that the colonists would use, and it is thought that they maybe got them from these shell rings. All through there is a shell ring. And if you're not from here, if you've never been to the coast, to the low country of South Carolina, this is known as Spanish moss, and it hangs all over our trees here. I even have it in my front yard. And this is another portion of the trail. This is the clam mound. This one is said to be 600 years old. So it's off that way. A little bit of the interpretive signage out here, and talks a little bit about the animals out here and what natural resources could be used to live. So people all the way from 4,000 years ago to now, till now, use the bounty of the salt marsh for food or what other materials they may need. Building materials, like I was mentioning, such as lime from the oyster shells. So it is definitely beautiful out here down the trail. We look out over the salt marsh and this big beautiful oak tree. Apparently I have an option to film in 4K, so I have just switched to that. So we might have gotten a little bit more high definition here, or 4K, whatever it is. I might have to go back and refilm some of that so that we can get some really good close-ups of the shell ring. Beautiful salt marsh. So the popping sounds are probably clam shells opening and closing, or other types of little shellfish out there catching food or whatever it may be. So this might be kind of obvious, but I wanted to talk a little bit about why it is important to not take things from sites like this. It's simply because of interpretation. Once these resources are gone, or once people have taken things from these important pieces of our American heritage, it's gone forever. It's no longer there for future archaeologists to interpret or offer new interpretations of the area. It's sort of like a crime scene. Once the crime scene is disturbed, you can't find the killer, right? So once the crime scene or once the archaeological site is disturbed and things are taken from it, it is removed from its context. And once it's removed from its context, it is no longer interpretable. You can no longer tell what it once was. So it is always good to leave these things in place if you find them. are coming up onto the clam mound, and it looks like the trail goes on that way and the mound circles around that way. And there are definitely little fiddler crabs. These holes here are for the fiddler crabs. Oh my goodness, they are everywhere. I don't want to step on them. Oh, look at them. They're cute. Look at them. Look at that guy. Is that pottery? No, that's definitely clamshell. So coming around the clamshell mound here, you see our clamshells here. And if you look right here, where some of it has eroded away, it is definitely all just a pile of clamshells all the way up, and there's vegetation and trees growing out of it. So this one is 600 years old by the Native Americans that lived out this way. So out over there in the marsh, you see the boardwalk that we were on for the shell ring. That's how far away we are from the clam mound. So another way that anthropologists or archaeologists interpret sites like these are through other sites around the world. Some of them that might still exist, such as in South America and unreached tribes out in the Amazon. I believe one of them has their village very close together around these similar clam mounds. So it is thought that that the clam mounds were definitely an area for them to live. Tilly leading the way through the path. Tilly, Tilly, Tilly. You're looking back at me. You're so cute. What did you think of today's adventure? Again, the shell ring is 4,000 years old and the clam mound is 600 years old. Either site has many different interpretations. Tell me what you think each site could have been used as in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe and to hit the little bell to be notified when I drop new videos. Thank you for following along, my friends, and here's to many more adventures together.